they have the possibility. Do you know the other thing is my son is going in with somebody else, I don't know if you know that, but they're incorporating.
You can get them all seated if you want. Thank them for coming.
So I don't know what that means.
Thanks everyone for coming. Sort of do it when you can see it.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Sorry guys.
Yeah. Get Nemo's head.
All right.
There it is. And
Testing.
there it is.
Testing 1, 2, 3. This is working? Yep. Alright, good. So, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for coming. This is really great, and it means a lot that you take time out of your day to come see this presentation. Worked hard on this. So, first of all, I need to give you guys a bit of an introduction. So, first of all, what is a senior project? A senior project is basically a project you do throughout the year, throughout your senior year of high school. You work on it, you select a topic, and you do all these sorts of different things, all this research, all these different papers, all these different assignments for this project throughout the year to have one big presentation close to the end of the year. So that's basically what a senior project is. So what am I doing my senior project on? As you can see up there, it says Uncovering the Keystone. I chose to do my project on Pennsylvania history. Why? Well, I've just always been into history. From a young age, I've known a lot about history. I think, my parents, my grandparents, all those people will tell you that, when I was 4 years old, I could tell you all the different states and what order they became states and all the presidents and all that stuff. I've just always been very into history. I found it to be very fascinating, and I'm very much of the belief that if you don't learn your history, you are doomed to repeat it. So I think it is very important to learn your history, especially local and state history, because I've noticed over the years that tends to get overlooked in schools quite a bit. You don't really talk about that. We don't even have Pennsylvania history class. We don't really learn about it except for maybe a couple of lessons. So you may be wondering, why is the project called Uncovering the Keystone? Why a keystone? Pennsylvania, as you probably know, is the Keystone State, but why is that? It's because during the founding of America, Pennsylvania essentially served as the keystone, just as how you have the keystone holding together an arch in the middle. Pennsylvania was kind of the same way. It held together the northern colonies and the southern colonies during the Revolutionary War. It was very influential, very powerful industry for a lot of American history, and it was just a very important state. So that's why it's called the Keystone State, in case you didn't know that. Alright, so that's a good explainer as to what exactly is up here. So here's my project verse, which is Psalm 78, 3 through 4. You can go ahead and read it. You might be wondering what I think is more important for me to share is why I chose this verse, and it's because it talks about the importance of learning your history. As I said before, how learning your history is very important. The Bible makes it clear that we should learn about our history and what happened in the past. And I don't know, that makes sense to me, I guess there was a good amount of verses I could have chosen because, as you probably know, the Bible is a historical book. If anything is going to talk about the importance of learning history, I think the Bible would definitely be one of those things, Yeah. That's what I believe, personally. And here are my original bubbles, as was discussed in May of 2022. This was kind of a little bit of thought experimenting. We didn't necessarily know what exactly I was going to do for my project. Here are the expanded bubbles in case you can't read the handwriting. So I had 4 books, 6 documentaries, 12 TED Talks, and I'll make it clear we were very generous as to what counted as a TED Talk because most TED Talks don't really talk about history, so you kind of have to improvise. And then a bunch of 20 miscellaneous stuff. And we talked about many different things that I could do as part of my project. So we talked about a custom mat, we talked about going down to like Gettysburg and Philly and the PA Capitol and all these places. We were talking about maybe me doing like a walkthrough or like some sort of class thing. So we were talking about a lot of that stuff, and we were talking about like different papers I could do. So like the founding groups of Pennsylvania, the Quakers, the Mennonites, the Amish, all of them, and also like Commonwealth versus the state, the different local government, the different local municipalities in Pennsylvania, and all that stuff. Here's my final bubbles. As you can see, it is quite a bit different. I ended up having 5 books and 4 documentaries and 12 miscellaneous items, plus a bunch of other stuff that I didn't do papers on, but I used for my research and all that. And I ended up doing a whole bunch of different papers for my personal application, and I ended up doing an online course mainly for outreach. So firstly, I'll talk about my books. So what books did I read for my project? So first of all, I had the Great Book of Pennsylvania by Bill O'Neill. It's essentially a trivia book. It has like a bunch of different facts about Pennsylvania, like a whole bunch of different categories. And one of them, which obviously I was the most interested in for the purpose of my project, was history. But there was like a whole bunch of other stuff too. There was like sports, pop culture, a bunch of different things were invented in Pennsylvania. Apparently the banana split was invented in Pennsylvania. I found that pretty interesting. And then next I had the Forgotten Tales of Pennsylvania by Thomas White, which is essentially a compilation of just very obscure stories from Pennsylvania. Just a whole bunch of different things. No like common theme or anything. Like there was like natural disasters, just like supernatural events, like a whole bunch of different stuff. Like a couple of stories that I remember specifically was there was like a sewer gator in Pittsburgh or something, which I don't know, I find that pretty crazy. And there was also like this guy who lived in Pennsylvania who was like a member of the Communist Party for the FBI, and like all of his friends and family hated him because they thought he was a communist. Then he revealed he was working for the FBI and he became like a celebrity basically. Yeah, I found that pretty interesting. And nextly you know what I mean. We have the Quakers by Captivating History. I'm not going to say the full title because it's like 8 million years long. You can see it's called The Quakers essentially. That's the short version of the title. And the book title kind of says it all. It is about the Quakers and essentially like how like William Penn became a Quaker and like how that heavily influenced the history of Pennsylvania and like the history of like the Quakers and like all the different schisms they have had and whatnot. I found it pretty fascinating. And then Pennsylvania Revolutionary War sites. I cannot pronounce his name right. Is it Charlotte Hugeman? I think that's how you pronounce it. So it's written by that person, and basically it's like all these different like stories and events and all this from the Revolutionary War that you learn about the Revolutionary War in history class quite a lot, but these were pretty unique stories that they don't really teach you about. I found them pretty fascinating. And then you have Western Pennsylvania Oil Heritage. Western Pennsylvania's Oil Heritage by Charles E. Williams, which essentially is about the history of the oil industry in Pennsylvania, which I find it crazy that oil for a very long time has been like a huge part of the Western Pennsylvania economy, and it's influenced all these different towns. And to cut to the chase, as you can see on the slide, my favorite book that I read was Pennsylvania Revolutionary War Sites because I found it the most engaging and I learned a lot from it. Like, apparently there was like massive shortages of lead and clothing and all these different things during the Revolutionary War. They don't really teach you about that. And there was like a bunch of different like Native American raids, essentially. Like, I think it was like Waynesboro County, the original county seat, actually got burned down by the Native Americans during the Revolutionary War. Just all these different things you don't really learn about, which I found to be very interesting. Next, we have the documentaries. So I watched 2 of these documentaries in this series called Battlefield Pennsylvania, essentially talking about like a bunch of different battles in Pennsylvania. Most of them were pretty obscure too. It was very fascinating stuff. So I watched one on the Battle of the Monongahela, which I find it crazy we don't really learn about that because it was during the French and Indian War, and it was actually the second worst defeat to Native Americans in American history. So you think you learn about them more. And there was like this General Braddock guy who was like trying to build like this big road, and they said in the documentary that had he succeeded, we probably learn about him like he's like another Hannibal, just like this great general did this crazy thing. But he died in the battle, so that didn't happen. And then you had the burning of Chambersburg, which I found to be quite interesting because most of the time when you talk about the Civil War in Pennsylvania, people automatically think of Gettysburg, and obviously that was a big part of that, but there was other towns that got attacked by the Confederates. There were a lot of different battles and skirmishes, even in Pennsylvania, all over the place. And basically, Chambersburg was burned down as revenge for the burning of the homes in Virginia of several prominent Confederate leaders. So they essentially tried to hold the town ransom. They did a cavalry raid, and they tried to hold the town ransom, but obviously it's a little small town, Pennsylvania, so they didn't have any money, so they just burned it down. And the next documentary that I'm going to talk about is the Ruins of the Scotia Barons by the Wandering Woodsman, I believe that's what it's called, yeah. And anyway, so I chose that one to watch because I thought it was interesting that we have essentially this abandoned place right here in Center County, where there was once a lot of industry, I think it was iron making, I'm pretty sure it was, there was a lot of different stuff going on down there back in the 1800s, and now it's completely abandoned, and there's just these ruins left. And I find it crazy because I don't really think of Pennsylvania when I hear of abandoned towns or ghost towns or anything like that. So, and then I have the U.S. Explained by That Is Interesting, which is basically just a general overview of the state. It talks about the history, the geography, a bunch of random tidbits of information as well. I found that was my favorite because I just felt it was a very good overview of the state of Pennsylvania. It talked about a lot of things that, if you wanted to learn the basics, it would be very good. And I felt like the guy who made it definitely was either a Pennsylvanian or talked to a lot of Pennsylvanians because it was just very well informed. I thought it was really good. And as for my miscellaneous, I watched bunch of different things, listened to some podcasts, I did a lot of different stuff, and one of the series that I watched quite a lot for this project was the Hidden Happy Valley series by a local historian. More on them in a bit, but it's essentially they go to these places in Center County, basically, these obscure landmarks, I guess you could say, and they talk about the history of them and the efforts that they have gone through to preserve these places pretty much, and I find that to be pretty nice. I like to learn, as you'll see later, and as we go, you'll see that I found the local history stuff to be very fascinating, so I liked watching that type of thing. And then I watched one video by the Center County Historical Society called Center Furnace, Our Roots in Iron, which is essentially about Center Furnace and how it influenced the history of Center County. And then I watched some episode, well, I guess we could listen to because it's a podcast. I listened to some episodes of Dead Center, which is this podcast. And I listened to Remembering Sherm Lutz, who was he was a pilot, he trained a lot of people, and he founded the first airport in Center County that was used for civilian purposes. So this very influential guy. So that was an interesting one. And then I listened to The Inverted Jennies, which was about so there was these stamps. There was this plane during World War I called the Jenny, and they printed out a bunch of stamps to commemorate it. But some of the stamps were misprinted because they could only print one color at the time. So the plain part of the design was printed on backwards. And they tried to destroy the misprint, but one of the sheets ended up getting out anyway, and it got cut up by someone at some point. So the stamps became a collector's item, and then there was this one lady who she had her inverted jennies that she owned. She had them stolen, and then they ended up in Center County. And that was a very interesting one as well. And then I also watched some videos by American Battlefield Trust. So I listened to Pennsylvania in the Civil War, which was an overview of what Pennsylvania did during the Civil War, all the influence it had, how many Union troops enlisted from Pennsylvania, the different important people who were from Pennsylvania. So it was an overview of that, and I had Valley Forge So it talked about like George Washington and the troops at Valley Forge and like some of the things they faced, and it was a pretty rough time for them, to say the very least. And I watched one about the Battle of Brandywine, which was essentially, so the British were trying to invade Philadelphia during the Revolutionary War, and they ended up doing so, but basically George Washington's army basically slowed down their advance, so they weren't able to advance further past Philadelphia. And the Continental Congress had time to evacuate to York. And if they had not had that time, the history probably would have gone a lot differently, and who knows if America would exist now. So that was a very fascinating piece of information, to say the very least. And here are my professional contacts. So I have Ernie Lay, who is the Director of Special Education / Head of School at New Story Schools. I believe I'm getting that right, yeah. Yeah, the Director of Special Education / Head of School at New Story Schools. And I reached out to him because I thought he would be a good guy to be my mentor, because I know him and I felt that he would do a good job of holding me accountable and giving me the help I needed. So I talked to him, he became my mentor. So, and I also had Chris Berger, who is a 8th grade history teacher at Upper Adams Middle School, as well as a member of the Borough Council from the historic town of Gettysburg. See what I did there? See what I did? So yeah, very historical guy. He knows a lot about history, and I had him do some stuff for me involving the online course that I did, but more on that later. Alright, so local historian. You heard me mention local historian before. So who are they? So basically they're this group, founded by Matt Maris, let's see if I got this right. But yeah, Matt Maris, who's a teacher in Belmont, and Dustin Elder, who is a teacher in Tyrone. So founded by Matt Maris and Dustin Elder, and they specialize in local history. They mainly talk about Center County, but as of lately, they have kind of expanded their ranks a little bit. So now they talk about a bunch of different stuff. Like they have someone who's like from, I think, Hagerstown, Maryland. There's someone who specializes on the Pennsylvania coal region. They have a whole bunch of people now, but it was started by these two guys, and I used a lot of their resources for this project. I watched a lot of their videos. I attended a lot of their events. They do events, they do tours. If you look on their website, you can probably sign up for some of them. They do them all the time. Alright, so first off, for my personal application, to give myself a general overview of what I was doing, I did subject timelines. And to explain what that means, I'll essentially say, so I have the main tenets of my project, I guess you could say, that I focused on. So I have Center County history, the military history of Pennsylvania, so the wars, the battles, all that stuff in Pennsylvania, and even wars where there were no battles fought in Pennsylvania, obviously World War II. Pennsylvania, there were no battles fought in Pennsylvania, as you probably know, but Pennsylvania still played a huge role in that conflict because it was a huge part of the industry. It was a huge part of a lot of the troops came from Pennsylvania. It was very influential. And that kind of ties into one of the other categories, which is the industries of Pennsylvania. So the iron, the coal, the steel, the oil, all that stuff. The history of that in Pennsylvania, how Pennsylvania had some of the largest histories. I meant the largest industries in American history. For most of American history, we produce the most iron, the most steel, all that stuff. I find that pretty neat. And then you have the founding groups in Pennsylvania. And there was a lot of different early settlers in Pennsylvania. I actually learned this. I didn't know this before, but apparently the earliest group of Europeans to be in Pennsylvania, they weren't even British, they were the Swedish. And that's kind of crazy, but I didn't cover them. Obviously I couldn't cover every single group, so I mainly covered the Quakers, the Mennonites, and the Amish, because those were the three most influential Christian denominations at the time in Pennsylvania. Most of the settlers were one of those three. So that's essentially and I did an overview of those timelines, so overview of those topics. So essentially I had so I put basic, just a general overview. I have a page of different events. Oh, this is when this happened. It gave all the dates or whatever. That's essentially what that was, to explain it. Hope that made sense. And I did a headstone cleaning event. in Belmont at Union Cemetery, which, this is, you may be wondering, why did I do this? Obviously it doesn't look all too fun to be going around cleaning headstones, but I believe it's very important because we went to this event. So it was like a Saturday morning, I believe, like at 9 o'clock. And we went to this event, and it was organized by this volunteer group. They do not get paid to do this. They take their time out of their day to go preserve this history and go clean those headstones. And basically what happened at this event was the first half, it was them showing us how to do it, they're giving us a lesson basically, and then the other half, we were kind of sent off in the groups and they'd have us go clean them. And I just, it definitely wasn't the most fun work of all time, but like I said, I believe it was important because, someone has to preserve this history. And it's definitely commendable that these people take their time out of their day to do this, because if we don't preserve this history by cleaning those headstones and keeping them in good shape, they're eventually, they're just going to erode, or, the elements will get to them, and we'll lose that history and we'll never get it back, and we'll be wishing we did something to preserve it. So I believe that is very important. Make sure it's changed. So I also did a speaker event with Matt Maris from local Astoria at the Big Springs Brewery in Belmont, and the subject was on the Union Cemetery. And as you can see on the slide, one thing I learned from that was, when was the Union Cemetery founded and where it got its name? And it was founded in 1796, and it was named that because that was a common name for Protestant cemeteries at the time. I also learned a lot about different people that are buried there. A lot of very important people are actually buried in that cemetery because we have many different governors of Pennsylvania who were from Belmont, so they're buried there, including Andrew G. Curtin, who was governor during the Civil War, and he was a big supporter of President Lincoln, so he was a very important guy, very, very high up guy. So yeah, and one of the other people I can think of off the top of my head was James Beaver, who is the guy that Beaver Stadium was actually named after. So I think that's crazy personally. I think that's crazy that those very important people were just buried right there, not too far from here. That's crazy. I also did a walking tour in Altoona with Jared Frederick, who's a instructor of history at Penn State Altoona, I believe. And basically it was called World War II in Altoona. It was about the different events and all the stuff that unfolded during World War II in Altoona. And I learned a bunch of different things that I found very fascinating from that. And one thing in particular that I want to highlight was I learned about Operation Pastorius, which was essentially a German operation during World War II to basically send these spies and sabotage the American economy. And Altoona was targeted because of the Horseshoe Curve and how it was very important to the Pennsylvania Railroad at the time. So it was targeted, and there were actually spies who were sent to Altoona, but the operation failed because one spy ratted the other spies out to the FBI. He chickened out and he ratted out all the other spies, so the operation failed. But we do know, there was still a lot of paranoia in the town despite this. So what happened was essentially they gathered up all the German-American residents of Altoona and interrogated them in the post office to see if they had, if there was anything fishy about them, if they were working for the Germans. And they couldn't find anyone, but we do know that there were Nazi spies who never got caught in Altoona, because you would have U.S. soldiers who were captured by the Germans in Europe who were from Altoona, and they would have all this different stuff on them that it's how did you get this? Just very crazy stuff. I think they had one of the soldiers high school report card. It's crazy. It's very interesting stuff. I think it's a shame we don't learn about this stuff, but it's very interesting. Then I had my founding groups papers. So as I said earlier, I covered 3 groups in particular. I covered the Quakers, the Mennonites, and the Amish. And what I learned is that Quakers and Mennonites had a very huge influence on Pennsylvania in the early history of Pennsylvania. They were a very huge influence on how Pennsylvania was governed, how Pennsylvania became Pennsylvania, essentially, how it became what it is now. The Quakers and Mennonites, there's been a lot of schisms over the years, and a lot of people just leaving those denominations, so they're now in very small numbers. Meanwhile, the Amish, they didn't really come around until after Pennsylvania had already been founded. They didn't come around until like the late 1600s, early 1700s. But nowadays, they're by far the biggest group out of all of those, and they're actually saying that if current rates continue, there's going to be 7 million Amish by 2100. There's currently only a few hundred thousand. Just think about that for a second. That's insane. So I also did a paper on the municipalities of Pennsylvania. So here in Pennsylvania, we have 4 different types of municipalities. We have counties, cities, townships, and boroughs. We also technically have 1 town, but that's a whole story in itself. It's kind of complicated, but those are the main 4. So the counties, so obviously you have the counties within the state, and then within the counties you have what are called municipal corporations. The other 3 are known as municipal corporations, and you pay taxes to both the county and the municipal corporation. And one thing that I find very fascinating about this topic is that most states don't do it this way. Like New Jersey does it this way, a few other states, and I believe like New England do it this way, but most states don't do it this way. Like in Colorado, they don't have boroughs or townships. They just have cities and counties. And it's because it's kind of like, I don't want to say like antiquated, but it's like this is like the old way of doing it. Like townships are actually like the oldest form of government in all of America. That is the original form of government in America, is townships. So they are very old, and a lot of states don't do it anymore. And people are kind of wondering, like, is Pennsylvania ever going to change their system? I don't know. That's something to think about, I think, personally, you know. Commonwealth versus state. So I also did this paper on what is the difference between Commonwealth versus state, because I've always wondered this, so I kind of wanted to research it, because it's like, oh, we're the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but not the state of Pennsylvania, but we are a state, so like, what's the point of that? Like, I've always wondered, and there's like, Pennsylvania is not the only one. There are 4 states, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, and Massachusetts, which are considered commonwealths. And there are also 2 U.S. territories, Puerto Rico and Northern Mariana Islands. And what I learned was there is essentially no real difference between a commonwealth and a state. The reason that some states and territories refer to is because there was like this idea during the Enlightenment by these philosophers that there would be like a commonwealth, which was essentially, how they defined a commonwealth was essentially a political community for the common good of the people. That's how they defined it. So a few of these states, including Pennsylvania, went with that terminology in order to emphasize like the freedom of the people. It's kind of crazy to think about that. There's like this little tidbit of history left. And then I have center, county, town paragraphs, which if you need an explanation as to what that is, essentially so there's all the different regions of center county. So you have the center region, otherwise known as Happy Valley. You have the Nittany Valley region, the Penns Valley region, the Bald Eagle Valley region, the Moshannon Valley region, and the Mountaintop region. So those are your regions of center county. And what these paragraphs essentially are is I took some towns, I took some communities from all those regions, and I wrote paragraphs on them, basically highlighting like some different facts about these towns, like some of their history, like some of them have some very unique traits in their history, so I highlighted that, and I mentioned like all the populations of these towns, like except for Penn Hall. I could not find the population data for Penn Hall. That's a whole can of worms, but yeah, so it was a brief summary of all these towns. That's essentially what it was, to put it short. Learned a lot about local history that I didn't know. It's kind of crazy. Oh, this town right here. A lot of people don't even know anything about their own hometown, and I find that kind of insane. And here is my custom map. And if you don't want to look at it there, it's over there on the wall. So I made this custom map. This was actually in the original proposal, to make like this custom map. And what I decided to do for it was, so I had a map of Pennsylvania, and I made a map of Pennsylvania, and I added all the counties, and it's a little hard to see, but if you look really closely, you can see I also added all the county seats. So like, Center County, as you probably know, is Bellefonte, Adams County is Gettysburg, Huntington is Huntington. Wow, very creative. So, yeah, actually a lot of counties are like that, where the county seat is just the same name as the county. I don't know why. Some of these people need to get more creative, but, you know. So I had the counties and the county seats, and I also had an insert of Center County, which includes all the boroughs and townships of Center County. And this is a side note, but I find it crazy that Rush Township, I believe it's called, you know, the township in western Center County is so much bigger than the rest of them. That's a bit of a tangent, but I just find that crazy. That, like, you can't cut this up anymore, you cut up everything else. Like, I don't know, but I have this map. Alright, so as for my outreach, so now we're on my outreach. So I did it, well, what I was planning to do. So I planned this Gettysburg Battlefield tour. So I planned this tour. I was aware that Senator Doug Mastriano, he does these tours of the Gettysburg Battlefield, and personalized tours where he explains, like, he's very knowledgeable about the history and the different parts of the battlefield. So I got into contact with him, and we scheduled like this tour. We had like a date and everything, but then we never got to do it just because of circumstances with my schooling, which that kind of sucks. But I still reached out to him, and I still talked to him about doing this tour. We were planning to like do like a tour for like the history class. It just didn't end up happening, but you know, we still tried. And here's the big part. So I have the online course. So what I did for the online course is I took I did 5 modules, and each module is made up of like videos and quizzes. So like module 1, that's like intro to Pennsylvania, like you have like the geography, the state government, the municipalities, you have all that. And then module 2 is Center County history. Module 3 is the founding groups. Module 4 is like the wars in Pennsylvania, and Module 5 is the history of Pennsylvania industry. So it's basically like instead of doing like one big paper as like my final thing for the project. I mean, I still technically did because I had to write the script or whatever. But instead of doing like an actual like big paper, I did this online course because we thought that would be a cool idea because, you know, I do videos in case you don't know, so I have a little experience with that type of thing. So I thought it'd be cool if we did this online course, and I made like a website for it. I made like a channel on YouTube for it called Uncovering the Keystone. I can provide the link. Actually, yeah, you'll be provided the link in a minute, and you get like a little bit of a preview up there as to like what those look like. And here's where things start to get a little interesting. So as I told you before, I contacted Chris Berger, a middle school teacher, a 8th grade history teacher at Upper Adams Middle School. And I got in contact with him, and I wanted to know if he would be able to have his students take my online course. And he was very willing to have his students take it. He actually looked at it himself, and one day he had his students take it. They didn't get to take the whole thing because it's a long course, but well, it's not insanely long. Like, it's not like it'll take a whole school year, but it's like longer than the amount of time they had. So they didn't get to do everything, but they did a good amount of it. And I had them take like a course survey for them, like basically giving me feedback. And I thought I got pretty good results because most of them said that they liked it, that they enjoyed it, and they did learn a lot from my course. So I was pretty happy about that. And I asked 2 questions at the end of my survey. Do you think there should be more focus on like local and state history in school? And would you share this course with someone who wants to learn more about Pennsylvania history? And on that first question, I got mainly yes. Some of them said unsure, which I definitely get. You know, you're a kid in school, you don't want to be like, oh, I don't know what you want to teach me. That's boring. I don't want to think about that. You know, I understand that. And then for the second question, everyone said yes. So I consider that mission accomplished. You know, I have this course that people think is a good source to get more information about Pennsylvania. I think that it's pretty good. And then I have so I actually reached out to local historian Matt and Dustin from Local Historia and asked them for some feedback about my course. And Matt actually got back to me. And he essentially said that he thought I did a good job. He thought it was like a good overview and it was very informative. He didn't get to look at the entire thing either, but he did say that he liked the deep dive in the Center County and liked some of the geography stuff I did. I think that's good. He also gave me some feedback. He gave me like some constructive criticism as to like what I can do next time, which I found to be very helpful if I was to ever do something like this again. I'd probably take some of his advice. He basically just said like, cover like more topics. Like he said to like cover more groups and like have like more activities instead of just videos and quizzes. But you're kind of limited in terms of what you can do just for a project like this. So I didn't get to fully flesh it out. But if I were to do so, his advice would definitely come in handy. And here we actually have a sample video from the online course. And there's a QR code if you want to pull up this course for yourself and take it. I just need to figure out how do we. There we go. I don't think there is. Oops. I forgot what I said.
In New York. Pennsylvania has no actual coastline along the ocean. However, Philadelphia is still a vital port city due to its positioning along the Delaware River. Pennsylvania also has a small coastline along Lake Erie to the northwest. Climate. As for Pennsylvania's climate, most of the state has a humid continental climate. However, as seen on the map shown on the screen, large swaths of southern Pennsylvania and the coast along Lake Erie have a humid subtropical climate. Northern and western Pennsylvania also experience significantly more precipitation than the southeastern part of the state. Population. Pennsylvania has a population of 13,002,700 residents according to the 2020 census, making it the fifth most populated state in the entire country. The most densely populated part of the state is the southeastern corner surrounding Philadelphia, the state's largest city. However, there are many major population centers outside this area, such as, for example, Pittsburgh and Erie. Rivers. Pennsylvania also contains more significant rivers than most other states. These significant rivers include the Delaware, Ohio, Potomac, Pine Creek, Allegheny, Beaver, Monongahela, and Susquehanna River. Most of Pennsylvania's major cities are situated along these rivers. For example, the city of Pittsburgh is located where the Ohio, Monongahela, and Allegheny rivers intersect. The capital city of Harrisburg is located along the Susquehanna River. Landform regions. With it being the 33rd largest state by land area, Pennsylvania contains a diverse array of different landforms. The state contains 5 different landform regions, as the map on screen shows. These regions include the Atlantic Coastal Plain, a small lowland region along the Delaware River, which includes the city of Philadelphia, the largest city in Pennsylvania, which is also where the Declaration of Independence was signed. Secondly, there is the Piedmont region in the southeast, where a large portion of Pennsylvania's population lives. This includes the vast majority of the Pennsylvania Dutch. A group of German settlers came to the region in the 1700s due to its rich soil being ideal for farming. Thirdly, there is the Ridge and Valley region, which includes a large chunk of central Pennsylvania. This region consists of many gaps and valleys within the Appalachian Mountain Range. The capital city of Harrisburg is located within this region. Next, there is the Appalachian Plateau. Located in the northern and western portions of the state, it is by far the largest region, with it consisting roughly 50% of the state's total land area. Mount Davis, Pennsylvania's highest peak, is located within this region. The eastern end of this region is near the border with the state of New Jersey, comprises a ridge which forms part of the end of the Appalachian Mountain Range. Lastly, there is the Erie Plain, the smallest region. This region is well suited for grape growing and is home to many wineries. Flag/coat of arms /motto. The flag of Pennsylvania consists of a blue field with the state coat of arms in the center, and it was first authorized by the Pennsylvania General Assembly in 1799. In 1907, it was mandated that the shade of blue on the flag be the same as that on the American flag. The state coat of arms is potentially one of the most iconic symbols of Pennsylvania. It contains a shield in the center, which symbolizes strength. On the shield is a ship to represent commerce being shipped worldwide, a plow to represent the state's natural resources, and 3 sheaves of wheat to represent both Pennsylvania's fertile farmland and wealth of human thought and action. Beneath the shield, there is a cornstalk and an olive branch representing peace and prosperity. On top, there is an eagle facing left. An eagle facing left usually indicates peace. And on each side, there is a black stallion with its front legs up. At the very bottom of this design, the state motto is inscribed: virtue, liberty, and independence. One last tidbit of information worth noting here. is that technically Pennsylvania is not considered a state. It, along with the states of Massachusetts, Virginia, and Kentucky, as well as 2 territories, Puerto Rico and Northern Mariana Islands, are officially referred to as commonwealths. However, it can be assured that there is no real difference between a commonwealth and a state in any meaningful capacity. This type of terminology is simply a remnant of a different era. Back in the 1700s, the term commonwealth was commonly used by enlightenment thinkers in reference to the idea of creating a political community for the common good of the people. While an interesting piece of history, the terms commonwealth and state can be used interchangeably unless you are referring to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania by its full legal name.
Everyone catch all that? Yeah, well, I didn't link it on here. You have to pull up the website, which you can just scan if you want to pull up the website, you can just scan the QR code. I'll give you all a minute to do that. If that's something you want to do. Going around once, going around twice. Alright, I guess we're moving on. So here we have my timeline. I don't really think I need to say much here, so I'm just gonna give you guys a minute to soak all that in. There's a lot of slides in this, so I'll just click it every once in a while. Let you guys skim it a little bit. I think this is the last one. Yeah. Alright. So learning stretches. So I had a lot of different things going on here. So I guess like the main thing is that I'm just kind of a stubborn person sometimes. I think I can do something and really I can't and I need some help. So like just like asking for help when I need it, that's like kind of difficult for me sometimes. And then just like having a schedule, a good schedule that I can follow to work on stuff, and just generally being motivated to work on it because you have like everything else going on, like you have the other school stuff still, so that's a little difficult for me a little bit. And one of the biggest challenges, I'm not sure if it's on here, is, and I believe it is, and it's just that, I didn't have like any sort of like support on this other than my family and whatnot. Like I didn't have like a senior project class and a bunch of classmates who would like help me out with it, so I was a little on my own in some regards in that sense. And another thing was hard. It was just hard finding like historical outreach. Like obviously there are like organizations out there, but it's just a little difficult to find sometimes. Like something that's like really juicy, that's like really would be really good for the project. That's a little difficult. Yeah. I guess there might be more, but I guess that's it on the slide. And I would just like to thank everyone for coming, and I will thank Ernie Lay and Chris Berger for helping me with my project, being my professional contacts. And I'd like to thank my parents, my sister, my grandparents, and all these people who supported me throughout the entire thing. I'd just like to say thanks for coming.
Freedom is going to have a little panel, and a couple of them weren't able to be here, so it's me and Paige. So I'll go first. So first of all, I want to say, really well done. You are really easy to listen to. You have a good speaking voice. You look very professional. Your slides are beautiful. So good job all around. I learned a lot. I think you learned a lot. Let's see. I know you only put up there that you had 2 professional contacts, and the original goal was 10. But Doug Mastriano was a professional contact. Matt Maris was all these people you talked to. They are your contacts. Don't sell yourself short. You did the work. Give yourself credit for it. But I did notice right at the end you said your learning stretch was having trouble finding outreaches. And I think if you had called a few more people, so here's a little challenge for you moving forward. If you had called a few more people, I think you would have found a lot of people who are just as passionate as you are, and who have a lot of common interests as you, and I think you would have made a lot of friends who would have had a lot of ideas. So, I know you watch a lot of videos on all the local stuff, but like, did you actually go to the Mansion or Center Farms? Did you go to those places, or did you just watch the video?
I did not get a chance to go to those
Yeah,
places. No, I
if
did
you
not.
could have gone to those places, I toured the Bow Mansion, and the guy there knows everything about every single thing in every single room, and who used to own it, and where they came from, and who they married. I think you would have been absolutely fascinated by it, and I think you could have really made a lot of friends there. So I want to challenge you going forward. I know you don't like making phone calls. Do it anyway, because it's going to help you out. I think she said the same thing from her project last year. The hardest thing is calling people, but it's a skill you gotta learn, and you would make so many friends because you're so friendly, and people like to talk to you and like to hang out with you. And so I think that's just something I want to challenge you on moving forward is make the phone calls, make all the friends, because then everything else is going to become easier and easier and easier. And I think you would have not found that last learning stretch to be a learning stretch. You would have been like, oh, I can just call my friend Matt, or the guy at Bow Mansion, or the lady at Center Furnace, and you've got the people skills. You do. You are like up here. You're engaging with the crowd. You're funny. You've got a good sense of humor. So I'm amazed with how much work you did. Quick question, or quiz for you. What's the difference between a borough and a township, or is there not?
There is a bit of a difference. So a borough, this is what I have in my paper. If you look at my portfolio, you would see that. Look, this is my paper. Essentially, a borough is governed most commonly by a borough council, which you have like the executive, who's like the mayor. The mayor doesn't really do a lot. They basically just oversee law enforcement. And then you have the members of the borough council, and that's like the legislative body of the borough. And I think another difference between, meanwhile, townships, you just have the supervisors and I believe commissioners. I'm not sure if that's the terminology, but you don't have like that same type of form of local government. And I think there's a population requirement for a borough. I could be wrong about that. No, I might be thinking of the fact that if you have like, you can't do this with townships, but if you have like 10,000 or more, I believe, 10,000 more people in a borough, you can actually hold a vote on whether to become a city. You can't do that with townships, so I guess that's another difference right there.
He grew up in State College Borough. I grew up in a township when I moved, so I learned something. I love your online course. Love it. You know, and I think the feedback you got from, is it Matt Maris? Like, yeah, put some like activities in instead of just doing the quiz, but like that's a time thing, and you did it so much. I think it's so interesting that you did it. I love that you included the feedback from the students who took it in a little pie chart, so like, that was really good and shows a lot of really great things that people thought about your course. Here's the science teachers. When you get time, make a 6th module on like the natural history of Pennsylvania, the animals, the plants, the geology. You got the geography and, you know, that just make my heart happy, you know. Give me some science there. But I love it. I think you did a great job. I'd love to see you keep going with that, like as like your fun project moving forward. You could make like a little module for like people who don't live in Center County, you know, things like that. I think like, this could be a lifetime project for you. You could get it published. You could be bringing in some big bucks someday with your YouTube channel. How many followers do you have?
On that YouTube channel, the Uncovering the Keystone channel currently has, I think, 8, like somewhere between like 6 and 8 subscribers.
Alright.
And it has a,
I'll go subscribe when I get 9.
yeah, in all fairness, the only people I've really shared with until now were like my parents and like obviously like Chris Berger, and I shared it with, he shared it with his class, so that's where most of the subscribers are from.
Yeah, I love it. I think another quick idea, another way to get more, is if you took those paragraphs you wrote on all the municipalities in Center County and made it like into like some sort of little brochure that you could put at like the Historical Society. People would pick it up, put your QR code there, get them on your course, get them on your YouTube channel, do some marketing, because you did a lot of really great stuff, and you get it out there so people know about it, because it's really good. I'm really proud of you. Good job.
I appreciate it. That is a really smart idea. I like that.
Market yourself. Don't hide it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
I can.
Hi, Pyro.
Great job. I'm like super impressed and proud of you. I know it must have been difficult you doing this like pretty much by yourself and like not in an actual school. And for those of you who don't know, I did a senior project last year, and I feel like school really did help a lot, like being in that class and seeing presentations before and like getting to practice that sort of stuff. So I'm really impressed. And with how calm you are right now, I'm kind of jealous because I did not have that when I presented. So good job. I have a few questions for you.
I have
So-
a few answers.
The first one is, I know that you're attending Messiah next year. What do you plan on studying and what do you want to do for your future job?
Okay, first of all, this is illegal. Who is leaking this classified information to you? She must have so I could pick on her like that. So basically, as she said, I'm planning to go to Messiah University this coming fall, and I'm going to, what I'm currently planning to do is I am planning to major in politics and international relations, because my hope is probably sometime in the future, who knows when, that I will run for state representative. I will be in the state house. That's my ultimate goal.
Wow, fancy. What was your favorite part of your project? Like, what was your favorite thing to learn about?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. I guess I would say maybe the Center County history, because that's the most overlooked. And I'm kind of curious as to the history of other counties. I know in my research I found obviously I found stuff about Altoona, and I found when I was attempting to find Center County towns, I found some stuff on Huntington County too, some resources for that. So it's definitely something I have to look into. But I just found it very interesting. There was all these major things that happened, all these big events right here in Center County, and most people don't even know that.
I mean, I don't know that, so I'm impressed with how much you've learned. And I agree with what Mrs. Jester said about the online course and how you should try and get it out there, because you put so much work into it and you can't let that go to waste. And I'm actually thinking of maybe going through the course myself, because I'd love to be more familiar with Pennsylvania history, because even though I've been here pretty much my whole life, I know pretty much nothing about Pennsylvania. So I'm definitely going to update my knowledge on that by using your course. And my last question is, how do you plan on applying this knowledge of Pennsylvania history in your future?
That's a good question. That kind of relates. So obviously you have the history aspect, right? So you have the Pennsylvania government, and that kind of relates to all the I already learned a little bit about the Pennsylvania government and all that. So you have all the politics to that and all that stuff, where it's sort of related to a certain extent to the history of Pennsylvania. So it can be a little helpful for that career because you have that previous information. I would say that. I'm not actually 100% sure, but that's what I would say.
Well, thank you, Kane. I'm super proud of you, and I can really see how much work you put into it, and it's really impressive. So thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate Pyra. You helped me figure out what to do. So.
Well, I'm glad I could help.
So before we wrap up, does anybody else have any questions for Brady about this topic? Or?
I'm all ears. Yes.
Braden, excellent job, by the way. I know how brilliant you are. And I would suggest when you go to Messiah that maybe you also minor in history. I fully believe you could do a double degree there. You said at the beginning that if we did not know about history, that it will repeat itself. Your extensive knowledge of history could carry you far when you are a representative for us. Consider that.
I guess you're right. I didn't even think about that, but that is great. Obviously it's beyond the scope. I'm not getting into it that much here, but you do already see a lot of that history repeating. So I guess it's also helpful in that aspect as well.
I was going to suggest a second major in education. You're a great teacher.
Really?
You're good at communicating your information. So
You are really good at it. You don't give
You're
yourself.
standing up there just talking to all of us like it's no big deal. You're doing great.
Maybe I really do undersell myself.
You did. You
Yeah.
don't undersell yourself. You're doing a lot of great stuff, but consistent teaching, you'll be really good at that too.
It is something to consider.
Just develop your own Pennsylvania history first.
This is true.
You got it.
So I think just on that point, when we went to the accepted students briefing, I think that the political science, politics, history department is kind of one that side. Already, so I don't think that's a big stretch to mine.
I think you make an excellent teacher.
Thanks.
That's my, smart, you would be great. Keep on going.
I mean, throughout the years, like growing up, you taught me so much about history. Like if I didn't have you as a brother, I would know nothing. I probably wouldn't know where all the states are. I'd be like my friends who don't know where all the 50 states are on the U.S. map. So thank you for
the
educating me.
teachers in Colorado would get Gettysburgs of like Tennessee.
They said Tennessee and Arkansas, and I'm glad that I'm not one of those people. So thank you, Kane.
No problem, Colorado.
So I'd like to point out something else too. First of all, thank everybody for coming. I know Brady said that. Thank you very much. And I know he had the slide, and most of you probably know, but his map of Pennsylvania and the map of Center County is hand-drawn, not traced.
Yeah.
Not Pennsylvania over here, I'll draw, it's hand-drawn. He does the same thing with the United States and the world.
In the world.
And so that's always been very impressive.
Brandon, I recall you, what year did he come to Nittany Christian? How old was he?
Second grade?
Third grade.
Third grade.
Third grade.
Third grade?
I recall you and Ethan sitting in the dirt, drawing maps, pretty much every day at recess. So that is in your blood. History has been part of you since I've known you.
It is so true.
First grade Sunday school, but we got you in there.
Yeah, so that was you at the whiteboard every Sunday too.
Well, we used to have drawing.
Any type of paper or something, right, there was a map.
Yes, true. We used to try and have drawing competitions, and I tried my hardest to beat him at drawing the U.S., and it never looked like the U.S., so he always won. He's always had the skill.
I'm not trying to brag here, but you know, I don't know what it is. I'm just good with maps. Like I can also draw obviously like I've been drawing like U.S. maps like basically since I was like 5 years old. So I'm pretty decent at them. Like I can draw like a decent map of Europe, most of the world too. The only parts of drawing the world that's really that difficult is like Southeast Asia and like Sub-Saharan Africa. Like that's always so hard because the borders are just like so random. So other than that.
So I had this beautiful map in my office, hand-drawn map in my office at work, and it's by both of my children. Initially supposed to be by Brady. It's a beautiful map of the United States, and then up in what would be Northwest Canada, there's a circle and it says Monkey World, and that was paid.
I didn't even know that existed.
She is very helpful.
Yeah. But everybody looks at that map and it's Monkey World.
Yo, I didn't know about that when I was a kid.
But we're very proud of you, Brady. Thank you. And anybody that wants a copy of any of this, like if you want a copy of this book to look through, we can send it to you as a PDF, and yeah, we can email you that. We can email you the address for his online course. You want to look at it. And as you said, he is identified on YouTube, so it's on YouTube as well. So,
Just search Uncovering the Keystone, and it should be one of the first things to pop up.
Yeah, it should pop up
That's
because it's
why.
a pretty unique name.
We're good. All good.
it's good.
All
Thanks for
right.
coming.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.